Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are returning to Dark Souls lore for a special investigation into the light, the dark, and the abyss, and what they mean to the world of Dark Souls. I want to give a really big shout out to Reddit user Sigim, who inspired the creation of this video with his in-depth posts about the nature of the Dark Soul. All his stuff will be linked in the description below. By far, the concept that has confused me the most when it comes to Dark Souls is, ironically, the dark. This is probably due to the fact that the dark is an intersection between many different elements, such as the abyss, the light, humanity, hexes, curses, sorceries, pyromancy, Londor, the Locusts, the deep, and so on and so forth. I think you'd all agree that it is a nebulous topic, to say the least. Well, I've decided it's time to start a proper inquiry into understanding how it all fits together. Understanding the dark is key to understanding the world of Dark Souls and is far more important than any fallen kingdom or knight of legend. The first thing we need to understand when discussing the dark is that it exists in symbiosis with the light, and was born when fire came about, as we will learn from the prologue from Dark Souls 1.
But then there was fire. And with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark.
This is again shown in the Bow of Want description, which reads, "Light and dark are two sides of the same coin, much like the soul and the curse." This is something we have all heard, obviously, but it is critically important to this analysis. Heat cannot exist without cold. In other words, for the concept of temperature to exist, you need both heat and cold. This is the exact same when it comes to the topic of light. Light casts shadows, and within those shadows is dark. If we take this piece of information, then we instantly understand that the power of the gods cannot exist without the dark. They are inextricably linked. This is important to remember because it is fundamentally what Gwyn forgot. He forgot that his power is linked to the dark, and it is why his choice to link the first flame had such destructive consequences, but we will get into all of that a bit later. Looking back at the prologue again, the following line is,
"Then from the dark they came, and found the souls of lords within the flame. Nito, the first of the dead, the Witch of Izalith and her daughters of Chaos, Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, and his faithful knights, and the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten."
It is in this that we see that beings like Gwyn, Nito, the Witch of Izalith, and the Pygmy were all beings of the dark to begin with. They arose from the existence of fire, but were born from the dark. From a cultural perspective, I want you to consider these actions in accordance with the concept of original sin. When Adam and Eve, against God's wishes, took from the tree of knowledge, they gave birth to sin. They were also tempted by the snake in the garden, with which we can obviously see a connection with Frampt or Kaathe. Adam and Eve, just like Gwyn, gained knowledge and power, but in turn cursed all of their descendants. Simultaneously, we can compare this to Japanese creation myths from Shinto beliefs. From them, we learn the following. At the beginning, the universe was immersed in a beaten and shapeless kind of matter, referred to as chaos, which was sunk in silence. Later, there were sounds indicating the movement of particles. With this movement, the light and the lightest particles rose, but the particles were not as fast as the light and could not go higher. Thus, the light was at the top of the universe, and below it, the particles formed first the clouds and then heaven, which was to be called Takamagahara, or High Plane of Heaven. The rest of the particles that had not risen formed a huge mass, dense and dark, to be called Earth, emphasis on dark. But we know all this. The main takeaway is that some beings, like Gwyn, believe that they should forget their origins and embrace the fleeting nature of light completely, while others believe that they should remember that they were born of the dark and not fight against this fact, for the dark exists within all human beings. Well, what is the dark exactly? In essence, the dark represents several elements that are unique to humans, such as memory, emotion, and chief among them, to want. There is nothing inherently bad about any of these things. However, when taken to their extremes, they can become unnatural. We will discuss this a little later. Kaathe tells us the following in Dark Souls 3.
There is one thing that you should know. There is a darkness within man, and I am afraid you will peer into it. Whether the fear will spark self-reflection or a ruinous nostalgia is up to you entirely. Fear not. Your choice will bring you no scorn.
Kaathe is referring to the dark and how it exists within everyone. However, it is emblematic of the fact that it isn't an evil entity, it just exists. That's why your choice to look inward will bring you no scorn, for it is natural to want to know more about oneself and one's nature. There's nothing wrong with the interest itself, but the choice to investigate does have danger. The danger is what lurks within the dark, the abyss. Defining the abyss has always been a challenge to me because at first glance it seems to be analogous to the dark. Once we investigate further, however, it becomes quite obvious what the abyss is. Let's start by having a look at a quote from Vendrick.
Fire came to be, and with it disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, light and dark. Dark was seen as a curse. Shadow is not cast, but born of fire. And the brighter the flame, the deeper the shadow.
Here we understand that even while the light grows in power, so does the dark. The growth is symbiotic in nature. The abyss, on the other hand, exists in absolute darkness, where there are no shadows. Its power is boundless, and that it is why it is such a threat to the gods. This is confirmed in several places throughout the games. One of the Locust preachers in the Ringed City tells us the following.
Where fire resideth, shadows twist and shrivel, but in the abyss there are shadows none. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
What is the abyss, though? Where did it come from? Why does it exist? Well, remember what I was talking earlier about how there is nothing wrong with the dark inherently. The abyss exists as the elements of the dark taken to their extremes. The best examples of this exist as the fragments of Manus' souls that appear in Dark Souls 2 as Nashandra, Alana, Nadalia, and Alsana, who were born of the want for power, wrath, envy, lust, and fear. Let's have a look at the soul of Manus itself. Ancient Manus was clearly once human, but he became the father of the abyss after his humanity went wild, eternally seeking his precious broken pendant. It seems that when humanity goes wild or becomes enraged, the abyss grows in power. Humanity loses its light, and its motivation is controlled by wild, untamed emotions. In this, we can see the delicate balance that exists within humanity, and how this balance can be tipped in either direction. I suppose this whole introduction to the dark can be looked at like the following timeline. Humans are born of the dark, are drawn to the light, the power of flame, which represents knowledge and power, and forget their origin within darkness. This estrangement from the dark then makes them fear the Age of Dark, which is ironically their natural state. This wanting of knowledge, of answers, is captured quite beautifully by Wilhelm, Knight of Londor, when he says to us,
I've seen your kind, time and time again. Every Every fleeing man must be caught. Every secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed seeker of truth. But in the end, you lack the stomach for the agony that you'll bring upon yourself.
Wilhelm of Londor looks down upon the Ashen One because he sees the hypocrisy within us. He sees someone who wants answers to all, but is not ready to sacrifice everything to find them. For all of our answers have been within us from the start, ignored while we sought out every great king, every decrepit castle, while the world collapsed around us. Dark is nothing more than a tool. It is the collective will of mankind, and can thus be manipulated to the gain of others. The primordial serpents understand this intimately. Frampt seeks to keep the shackle of the gods fixed tightly on the ankle of humanity, to use it to maintain their rule. Though Frampt is an agent of the light, the dark is nevertheless utilized for his and his master's ends. Kaathe is the exact same, only he is more transparent regarding his motives. The thing is, neither serpent ever asks what the chosen undead wants, and instead commands their will to do their bidding. That being said, when the will of dark has been utilized in the past, it has had disastrous consequences, seen most clearly in New Londo and Ulasil. Remember, when discussing the dark, we must consider the possibility that darkness exists on a spectrum, and is linked with all human emotions. Think of it like the Force from Star Wars. The Force is just the Force. It isn't inherently evil, but it can be used both for good and for evil. Let's have a look at the Darkwraiths. Armor of the Darkwraiths, former knights of New Londo who descended into dark. Their armor transformed and remains a symbol of the dark servants and their diabolical art of life drain. The armor of the Darkwraiths, which closely resembles that of the Ringed City Knights, were corrupted by their use of life drain, an ability that allowed them to rip the humanity from someone using Dark Hand. Dark Hand and its diabolical nature did plunge New Londo into chaos and despair, but think of what Kaathe may have been trying to achieve, or whichever primordial serpent was overseeing this. Part of the overall problem with the Dark Souls world and its endless cycle of fire linking is that humans hold onto their humanity, their pleasing human form. In doing this, however, they refuse to be taken on by their true nature of a hollow, which is a crime against nature at its core. Life Drain forcibly rips this connection from a person, pushing them into their natural state by force. This could be seen as the right thing to do in the end, since it involves humankind submitting to what they are supposed to be. However, this is contrasted by the fact that the Darkwraiths are using the dark for evil, and are agents of the Abyss. Humans should be accepting the dark on their own accord, and some do. Something I'll touch on quickly is that the Locusts were meant to guide men to the dark willingly, but they mostly failed at this, seeking to consume them instead. Perhaps force is the only way to make humankind accept the dark. New Londo would have been the bane of light, should it have grown any further, but Gwyn, ever being the good guy that he is, decided to wipe out the entire city. Ingward lets us know more about the New Londo city and the ruins in the following.
The Darkwraiths are the enemies of man, and any living thing that has a soul. They were born in New Londo, and that is where they perished. The entire city was sacrificed to contain them, for that is how great a threat they were. Long ago, the four kings were powerful men. Only their hearts were weak. When an evil serpent dangled the art of life drain before them, they were unable to resist, and became pawns of evil.
The dark, and by extension the abyss, grows from intensity of emotion, greed, and temptation in particular. Primarily, it appears that humans are the most susceptible to the abyss, and the compatriots of the gods seem to look down upon you for this, especially Kiran.
Then you have no business with me. Are you human? I forgive you.
What are we being forgiven for? The death of Artorias, or the fact that we are born of sin? I think it's the latter. Humans are born from the Dark Soul, and its existence is proof of humanity's connection to sin. The Purging Monument in the Ringed City is a part of this as well. It is a monument that removes the undead curse, at least for a time. It both forgives sin and also allows it to continue by allowing you to maintain the false facade of a normal-looking being. This brings us to the topic of hexes. Hexes are particularly dangerous in regards to their connection to the darkness and the abyss, because they not only look for power in the dark, but they pervert it. The description of Dark Dance reads, "Hexes are an expression of human depravity, of which this dance is a perfect example." And to add to my theory that the dark grows in power from strong human emotions, we have the profound still and affinity descriptions. This hex, born of jealousy and humiliation, is a locus of dark thoughts, the very things that reflect the true essence of life itself. Also, it appears to be an expression of envy or perhaps love towards another that will tenaciously pursue its target, even if, like so many human desires, it amounts to nothing but misfortune. On the other hand, we have the Whisper of Despair description, which is very interesting. It reads, "The dark blankets the world in black, a thing of tranquility, a thing serene." This must be the other side of the spectrum, when dark is not used as a weapon or a tool for power. Simply giving in or embracing the dark without motive seems to be a thing of serenity, and that to let go is a good thing. The dark is therefore synonymous with jealousy and humiliation, but also love and serenity. This is clearly seen in regards to Alva, who is spoken of by the Locusts of the Ringed City.
One was a wayfaring knight on an endless, forbidden search. Only the abyss granted closure, if not reunion with his beloved. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
Alva had to give in to the dark to be with Zuli, perhaps even in death. It would make sense for the abyss to be synonymous with death, but perhaps not in a malevolent way. The reason why the abyss is so dangerous is because of its proximity to both love and pain. It is mired in risk and misfortune, but also happiness perhaps. The dark, and humanity for that matter, seems to be somewhat unaware of the pain it causes. Think about the humanity sprites, for instance. They are drawn to you, but they don't seem malevolent, even though their touch damages you. Similarly, think of the Firekeepers and what Irina says to you.
Who is there? Is someone there? Anyone? Oh, please, whoever you are, touch me. The dark surrounds me, nibbles at my flesh. Little creatures, they never stop biting. So please, hold out your hand and touch me.
Could these little creatures be humanity sprites, not wishing to cause pain, but instead just be seeking a light in the darkness? I want you to understand that the dark is not just evil. The perception that it is just plain false. This is again confirmed to us in the description of the Dark Greatsword, which reads, "By its nature, dark is normally tranquil, but this hex releases a focused blade of dark in an uncharacteristic flash of brilliance. It is normally tranquil, which is something of great importance. Gwyn and the gods would have you believe that the dark represents the painful and agonizing death of all things, but it's more likely to be a natural passage of life. This ties into the overall theme of Dark Souls in the regard that Gwyn was obsessed with extending his reign unnaturally. The first sin, to link the fire, is essentially a sin against nature. To reconcile this, one must make peace with the dark, and cast off worldly possessions and titles. This is something Gwyn was simply unable to do. Dark Souls is asking us to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that at some point we must accept the will of nature. The game flat out tells us this in the description of the Chaos Rapier, which reads, "Nebulous, inky, and serene, the dark holds an allure matched only by the fear it strikes in men's hearts. Could it be nature holding a mirror to mankind?" Furthermore, Grendel, a scholar of the dark, echoes this when he says,
"The embrace of the dark is gentle. Let it absorb your sorrows forever."
In a world like Dark Souls, who wouldn't want a gentle embrace? The kingdoms of old never lasted, even the gods have all died off. I don't really want to go out on a limb and say it's a meta-narrative for Miyazaki telling us to stop obsessing over Dark Souls, but maybe it is. The Abyss seal tells us the following. What is dark? Perhaps we already know. We fear the dark, yet find solace in it. Those who join this covenant can see the hidden dark chasm. The reason we fear the dark is because we don't understand it in its entirety. Fear of the unknown is terrifying to us, but also alluring. We seek the truth, like Wilhelm tells us, but we fear it at the same time, that we lack the stomach, and he's right. All of us have been linking the fire over and over again, to live out the same cycle of pain in perpetuity, all because of fear. The problem is that humans are inherently incapable of accepting their fate. Even Dark Souls portrays humans predominantly as ambitious, greedy, and deceptive. Even you who covets the souls of lords. Why would you want to give that up, to make all your sacrifices worth nothing? Dark Souls explicates this to us in the description of the Wrathful Axe, which reads, "What is being referenced here are the shards of Manus that we discussed earlier, the concepts of power, wrath, envy, lust, and fear. Not even the gods were exempt from these. Gwyn feared the dark, maybe more than any other, and his fear wrought more destruction than any army ever could. Perhaps Dark Souls is trying to explicate to us the dangers of fear. It's easy from our perspective to judge Gwyn for his actions, but can we say we would not have acted the same? The gods existed in darkness for a long time, and fire represented the possibility of change in the world. At its core, Dark Souls is a cautionary tale against mindless ambition, for it only leads to ruin. In saying that, Gwyn should have understood the nature of fire. Fire fades, it is not everlasting. Consider this, the Lord Souls are flames. By nature, they eventually burn out, even the Dark Soul. In accepting these souls, Nito, the Witch, Gwyn, and the Pygmy should have all understood that this gain would require sacrifice. For the gift of knowledge and ambition, they also inherited a world that would eventually die. Interestingly, it would seem that Firekeepers are the only ones that have the capacity of understanding this. It has been theorized by myself and others that Filianor is the first Firekeeper, and the reason why all other Firekeepers needed to be blind was because of the truth they understood. The Age of Dark is inevitable, and it may already be present. Firekeepers are scorned by many, it would seem, perhaps because they are able to see what others cannot. Think of it. Anastasia had her tongue cut out for blasphemy, and Irina is seemingly crippled. Were these women punished because they spoke the truth? It may be the reason why Firekeepers are not allowed to see, for they only show visions of betrayal, perhaps by the gods themselves. Another group that seem to understand this to a degree, but maybe from a different perspective, are Pyromancers. The Pyromancers of the Great Swamp do not really want for anything. They seem to be unconsciously separating themselves from the yoke of humanity by existing at peace with nature. It would seem that those who obscure their sight in some way are the ones most in touch with the world. Goth's helmet is packed with resin, the Firekeepers are blind, and the Pyromancers seem to do this to an extent as well, at least the older ones. The following comes from the Old Sage Blindfold. Attire of Pyromancers of the Great Swamp, particularly favoured by old sages. The large blindfold blocks out unnecessary light, allowing one to observe a pyromancy's true essence. The flame reveals all and obscures all. The old sage's blindfold tells us that flame reveals all and obscures all. If this truth is understood by the Pyromancers, then they understand the nature of the world better than most. It's saying that flame allows us to see in the darkness, but also prevents us from seeing the true nature of the world, that darkness is a natural state of being. It's quite beautiful, I think. You might be wondering where I think hollowing fits into this. Well, we already know that the dark consumes things it comes into contact with. I want you to consider this. If the nature of the dark is to create serenity, tranquility, how would this be achieved? In my view, the dark soul would have to become whole again, the disparate shards of humanity brought back together. This is somewhat confirmed by the words spoken in the Lord of Hollows ending. Make Londor whole. Since Londor is the home of Hollows, this makes sense to me, a gathering of humanity as a society, to eventually be consumed by the dark. Again, we can mention the Locusts of the Ringed City. Part of the description of the White Preacher arm reads, "The white-faced Locusts were meant to beckon men to the dark with sermons, but most of them are unable to think past their own stomachs. Their purpose is to guide men willingly to the dark, but consumption of their souls, of their humanity, is an abyssal action. The forceful wanting does not allow the choice of embracing the dark to take place. Hollows feast upon souls, not channeling their power, but simply feasting upon them. Such an action could be considered as part of reforming the dark soul, especially when you consider what human dregs do. They sink to the lowest depths imaginable, perhaps reforming the bedrock of the world, to truly become one with dark. This isn't even a new concept, as Agdane tells us.
In the past, humans were one with the dark.
If by this he is referring to what the humanity sprites are, then the nature of the dark becomes even clearer. The beginning of fire, shown in the prologue, bound these sprites of humanity to human bodies, giving them form. We know them as hollows. A sprite was not hollow, and did not require anything. A hollow, gifted with ambition and want, requires souls to fill it, just like water in a cup. Such is the nature of the undead curse, to be made full over and over again, so no one can maintain his or her memory and will. It allows humans to be capable of things like love, but also despair. It's a trade-off, and the rise of places like Londor might reflect that the world of Dark Souls is ready to become sprites again. It's quite the revelation when you realize that the real monster is you. You're essentially just the same as Aldrich, a consumer of massive amounts of souls, just to satiate your own power. This leads us to the cycle of flame. The linking of fire prevents the Age of Dark from setting in, keeping the tranquility of the dark at bay, so both the gods, or what's left of them, and mankind can retain their sanity. The thing is, it's all a lie. Think about the Age of Fire like the Matrix. In the Matrix, society is mostly intact. People can live their lives, but at the end of the day, it's not real. Aldia tells us the following in Dark Souls 2.
All men trust fully the illusion of life. But is this so wrong? A construction, a facade, and yet a world full of warmth and resplendence. Now, Hollow, are you intent on shattering the yoke, spoiling this wonderful falsehood?
It makes us consider the question, would you rather live in a world that you know isn't real, or confront the truth of the real world, but be unsure of what could happen? There's also the very real possibility that continually linking the fire doesn't work. In Dark Souls 1, you only had to kill one Lord of Cinder to link the flame, essentially. In Dark Souls 3, you have to kill 4 or 5 if you count the Soul of Cinder. The price to link the fire continues to grow. What happens when not enough souls exist to satiate the fading flame? This is why Dark Souls 3 is good to offer us multiple endings. To let the fire go out essentially allows the Age of Dark to set in, even if tiny flames will dance across the darkness at some point in time. While for me, the canonical end to the series is the End of Fire ending, my favourite ending from the series is the one added to Dark Souls 2 in the Scholar of the First Sin.
There is no path.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Dark Souls lore. I know I've been away for a little bit, so I really wanted to make this a strong return to the lore series, and it's definitely quite a long video that I haven't done in quite a while at this length. As usual, I'd like to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons. They really mean the world to me and really push me and motivate me to work harder and harder. I'm going to try to get more videos out quicker in the future. It's just I've just got a lot going on in my life at the moment that YouTube sometimes has to take a back seat. But all in all, thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Until next time.